Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. You see, my great friend and colleague, Lieutenant Commander Jamie Sorenson, who you may remember from Season 3, Episode 1, as the author of the book, Why You Tried to Kill Yourself, where she and I dived into the very heavy but important conversation about depression and suicidal ideation. Well, she hit me up on Facebook a couple weeks ago and said, what do you think about doing a podcast episode where we answer listeners' questions about relationships? You see, she's got a second book out and it's called Single, Pitiful, and Unlovable. Yeah, right. And I know firsthand as a clinician who specializes in relationship and sexual issues that there is so much that y'all want to talk about, but are afraid to talk about when it comes to intimacy, sex, and love. So I said, sure, why the hell not? We collected a bunch of questions and sat down for a super raw and authentic off-the-cuff conversation. You get 2 mental health practitioners for the price of one in this episode. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, but I think you're going to find this conversation incredibly enlightening. So without further ado, will you please join me in re-welcoming the one, the only, the ever incomparable Lieutenant Commander Jamie Sorenson. Hey, Jamie.
Hi, Tamara.
So excited about this one, girlfriend.
Me too. It's just exciting chatting with you. I love your energy.
Right back at you. So we collected a bunch of questions from listeners and all about their relationships, the ins, the outs, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to do our best as 2 mental health practitioners in different niches to dive in and answer some of them from our perspective. Sound good?
Yeah. Sounds great to me. Yeah, it sounds fun.
So let's start off with like the new beginnings type. So one of the big questions that we got, and it's super common, is how do I know if a person is into me?
Yeah. Well, what do you think?
I am a big energy kind of girl. So, I mean, there's a big difference between someone looking at you across the bar and then someone really looking at you.
Yeah.
Across the bar.
Yeah.
I can get super nerdy on it and say, from a mating behaviors perspective, people's pupils will start to dilate. They'll start fidgeting. Women will often play with their hair, and supposedly that's a biological adaptation to look at me, preening myself for you.
Yeah.
We're not all that different from peacocks, turns out.
Yeah.
There's definitely an increase in interest level and how the frequency of them typically talking to you, unless they're an intense introvert. But even then, you're still going to notice their attention is being drawn towards you.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jamie?
Well, so I know the person who sent me this. I just know him from a lot of my work online, and he is a sweetheart, just an absolute sweetheart. I'm not giving his identity away at all, but he really likes a girl. And so they have, they met through traveling, and they've had an online friendship since that time. Gotcha. And he likes her, and he's interested in her, and he wants to know, how do I know if the person's into me? So I just, again, I love that we're communicating, because my mind was not going about the preening, and the pupils. Like, my mind is like, well, how much is she trying to get to know you? Like, how much does she, ask, are you interested in this? Because in her mind, is she wanting to know, are we compatible? Like, what depths of communication is she going to spend time, especially with this guy? Like, do you like this? Do you want to do that? Or, what is he interested in? So, if I was going to make plans for us, that he would like that and be happy with it. It's kind of funny, because the older I get, the more, and even my patients, I show them from Monsters, Inc. Remember that snail? I'm like, take it at the snail's pace. He's like going. So, it's like taking it slow, but, are they calling you just to say, do you like this? Or I'm making plans. If someone how much effort are they putting into knowing you and doing things with you?
Yeah.
I think that's huge, but I think what's even more important than that is, and I wrote a lot about it in my book is, and it's a fictional book, but I put all kinds of, people ask me questions all the time. I put this kind of stuff in the book as well. But, you got to know yourself. So if someone's into you and you don't like them, that doesn't even matter. Or if you know yourself and you're like, I like that person, but we would never be compatible, rule out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I like that person, we would be compatible. Do they like me back? Is there desire from them for me? Because if they don't desire me back, I don't want that either. You have to know and love yourself enough to know that you're desirable. And this person who, wrote this question to me, he's an absolute sweetheart, and I told him, like, you just deserve the best. Hold out and wait for the best, and make sure they like you back and desire you back, because, in the end, if you don't feel desired, that's a pretty crappy feeling to feel. So yeah, I think, I don't know. So there's physical responses, but then there's effort as well.
Right. And I agree with you. That's what I was getting at with the interest, the increase in interest level. So
yeah.
Is she reaching out on her side? Is she taking notice when you're speaking to her? And I love that you are kind of alluding to this piece of the compatibility aspect, which is a very misunderstood and phenomenon, I think, in our culture. Research really shows that you guys can be as different can be. And some of our other questions, we'll get into that more so. But what matters is, do we have common core values?
Right. Absolutely.
Will we enjoy hanging out together?
Yeah.
That's important. If not, you're probably not going to want to get naked either.
Yeah.
Unless we're just
well, I mean, and when you're over 21, or I mean, maybe over 31, that starts to apply. Before that, it's like, whatever,
Well, we can get naked, but I won't want to hang out with you afterwards. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You can go now.
Yeah, exactly.
So how about this one? What do we do about a partner's jealousy?
Yeah. I don't have a lot of tolerance for that. It's just kind of like...
You don't seem like the girl who would.
No, I mean, I was in a really long-term relationship with someone who was very jealous, and it was exhausting. And then I was in another long-term relationship with someone, and they were never, ever, ever jealous. And it was just, I was so relaxed. It's like, my life's too busy to deal with the stress of like, oh, is he not going to like this? Is he going to like this? Am I going to get a guilt trip about this? Am I busy at the end of the day with a patient? No, like, I know my morals, I know my values, and if you don't trust me enough to know my morals and values, we don't belong together. I don't have tolerance for it, me personally. So I don't know. Hopefully you have a different perspective. Otherwise, this is kind of a boring answer.
Slightly so. I think, it's important to take a look at what's behind the jealousy. Kathy Labriola, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, wrote an entire jealousy workbook. It's more written from the standpoint of polyamory and open relationships. So it applies to jealousy of all kinds, really, because what she says is that jealousy is a complex ball of emotions. Sometimes there can be nuances of anger. Sometimes it's isolation, sadness, insecurity, because it's a lot of people, they're not just jealous of, and you alluded to this a bit, they're not just jealous of other people coming in and marking their territory. They could be jealous of your time. They could be jealous of you being around your family, particular members of society, not just the opposite sex or the same sex, depending on what you're attracted to. And so I think it's important to start off on a conversation very early on in the relationship, taking notice of, how does this person approach our shared space together?
Right.
And when it does rear its head, and it will for all of us at some point, how is it handled? I think that matters most. Do they just shut you down? Is it their way or the highway?
Uh-huh.
Are they open to a conversation about it? Or do they have a intensely rigid, narrow-minded worldview that, for example, once we're monogamous, well, that's it. You don't have a need for friends. I'm your friend. I'm your daddy. I'm your life coach. I'm your Jesus. I'm your... Yeah. That's a problem for me. Because no one person can satisfy all of our needs. And I'm not just talking about polyamory here. I'm talking about in general. I like what you were saying about, we need to be truly solid in who we are first.
Right.
And we used to kind of more intuitively understand this. It takes a village. Like, I still need my family. I still need friends. I still need my own hobbies.
Right.
You're my partner. I want to share it all with you.
Right.
But if you are asking me to literally breathe in your air and exhale my air into your lungs, we're going to have a problem.
Right. Right, right. And then two, what are they jealous? Like, what if they're jealous of your career success, you know? So if they can't support you there, you know, then you lose someone that you love very dearly. You know, where does that support, you know, not the lack of support transcend to? So, yeah, I just,
For you,
yeah,
it's a no-go. And for me too, I'm saying, okay, well, we can have this conversation if your partner is open and willing to. If they're not, then to me, that's an automatic no-go.
right,
And
right.
then depending upon the situation, they may need to do some counseling. They may need to get to the root of where their insecurities lie.
Right, right. And we're not their counselor. Well, I mean, like you're married, but like if I'm dating someone, like I'm not your counselor, gotta go.
Exactly.
Yeah, but and I think too, you know, like right from the very beginning, I let guys know I need us time, I need me time. Like that might be me out with my friends, that might be me doing something, and then I need a lot of alone time. You know, especially when I'm like really into writing, and it's just kind of like you exist. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and it's like if you can't respect that space, you know, I'm not the one for you. Like I don't do good with someone who's always at home and in my face. You know, someone says I'm a workaholic. I'm like, oh, we might be compatible.
I agree. Esther
Yeah.
Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, is really good for this one too, to see
Yeah.
the way that social culture has changed with what we expect in modern relationships. Now we've forgotten. So I would definitely refer people there. And yes, to a therapist, a pastor. Have that person talk to someone outside of just you if they're open. And if they're not, well, then boo-boo, you might have to gift them with their own path.
Yeah, yeah. I am not a fan of staying in relationships that don't work.
Nope,
you know, it's funny because me and the chaplain I work with were like, if you want to make your marriage work, go talk to him. If it's a crazy, unhealthy relationship, you want to make your divorce work, come talk to me. You know, and that's kind of how we chat about it. And it's kind of a joke, but it's just, you know, once you've been doing this job and you've seen over like 10,000 patients, you know, like
you can tell.
I have you know, I'd be willing to bet about, you know, $100,000 on a certain relationship, whether or not it's going to work or not. You know, like, you know, it's like you just get the gut feeling. It's like, oh no, we got back together. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this in a year. You know,
and a lot of it is very evidence based. I mean, the Gottman Institute is big for a reason. They can predict with a 93% accuracy, and I didn't just pull that statistic out of my ass. That's legit. Whether or not a couple's going to make it based on how they communicate and argue.
Right,
so
right.
Right now we're talking about jealousy, but it could be anything: parenting, money, sex.
Right, exactly.
Those red flags are there. Yes, therapists can see it. And sometimes my job, I tell them straight up front, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. I'm going to pull for your relationship as long as I can. But if I think you've waded into toxic territory, I'm going to tell you.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, and like Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink, he talked about contempt. Like, you know, there was these therapists.
That's the
and
biggest one.
Yeah, yeah. And like they were watching couples and it's like, you know, what behavior is the number one predictor for relationships not working? It's contempt. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's true for business as well. If we've gotten to the point where I am literally disrespecting your personhood, then we're out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how about kiddos? What do we do when one of us wants them and the other one doesn't? Can that relationship work, Jamie?
Oh, I think you should start with this one.
As a mama and who has dated as a single parent, this is tough. I have put relationships on hold because actually it was the reverse for me. I have 2 children. I actually chose to shut that factory down after my second daughter. I was still married to their father at the time. And, you know, I dated some men who didn't have children and they wanted them. And I had to let them know very early on in the relationship, you know, a couple dates in, you know, I'm not opposed to the idea, but I'm really not planning on that. So
right.
If that's a no-go, then you should know that up front. I don't think it's an automatic deal breaker. I don't think, you know, if you guys are compatible in every other area, you can continue talking about that. But absolutely, I tend to shy on, that relationship's probably not going to work because it turns out for human beings, existentially, legacy is a huge deal.
Right.
When someone feels that drive and they want to have something, in this case, children, transcend them after they're dead, not to mention all the meaning and purpose and passion we get out of that. It's a big deal. And a lot of men and women, I'm glad women are finally feeling more comfortable to own that when they're not feeling that drive, that, you know, they should be able to have that autonomy respected.
Right, right.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, this question is, I think, you know, we work in mental health, so we don't really think a lot in black and white, you know, so, you know, I want to have kids, she doesn't. Well, what is your definition like being a parent? Like, does that mean biological? Does that mean adopted? Does that mean foster? Does that mean stepchildren? I sit here and I think, of like a lot of the relationships close to me where, there's so much conflict over being the step parent versus and the stepchild. And I think that's a lot of, what people are talking about. So it's like, she doesn't want to have kids, so she doesn't want my stepkids, or she doesn't want to have more biological children with me, or I want biological children, but she wants to adopt, or, those are, big factors as well. Like, as and I think most people probably think about this from a biological standpoint, and I know different women over the years who have told their husbands, like, we're having kids, and he makes it very clear he doesn't, and they have kids. And the guy eventually really loves the kids, but then there was so much resentment and bitterness, maybe even the pregnancy, or maybe like the first year of the baby's life, that it's just this weight in the relationship, and it's like, I'm taking care of couples, and it's like, I'm going to divorce her if she doesn't want to have my kid. It's just such a big conversation, to have. I've talked to one of my girlfriends one time. The thought of someone wanting to have kids was so repulsive to her. And I'm like, well, you can't be that narrow-minded, like, to everyone, like, most people don't think that way. But yeah, it's such a communication factor, and I think, so many people get married when they're young, and it's like, okay, they'll change their mind. And it's like, you got to really think about, like, no, this person's pretty solidified in what they want and what they don't want, and what they're open to, and I'm, I don't know, it's a conversation piece, but I've seen plenty of people get divorced over, one wants kids and one doesn't, but, and then, other times it does work. So yeah, I don't know. There's no definite answer in that one that I have at all.
I think that conversation just needs to happen very early on. It doesn't need to be first date, creepy conversation. Yeah. I want babies. How about you? But it definitely needs to be happening before you guys decide to take it to the next level, move in together, get engaged.
Yeah.
Whatever your timeline is.
And it's just kind of like, we got to remember, like, somebody explained to me the 7-year life cycle, so it's at 21, you're like, yeah, I want to have kids. But then, you're born. And then when you're 7, you're kind of like a little person, and you're in school all day. Then you're 14, you're in puberty. And then you're 21, you're an adult. Then you're 28, and you have like a 7-year cycle. So, maybe at 21, you think you want to have kids, and then you get really into your career and travel or whatever, and you change your mind and your partner doesn't, then that's something else you have to deal with. But it is a huge deal. I've even, people even get divorced over, like, the names of what they're going to name their kids, or, I go to Catholic church and you go to Protestant church, and there's not a compatibility there. So it's a huge, huge issue. And at the very least, you have to be good communicators about it, even if you don't agree.
That's going to pretty much be the bottom line for almost all of these questions.
Yeah.
But with over 7 billion people on the planet, that statistically alone, you have hundreds of thousands of really good possible compatible mates who will want what you're wanting. So
yes,
I know right now it feels like this is the only person, and I'm not disrespecting the relationship, but if the relationship cannot come to terms with that, you got to let them go, because that's not kind or loving to force or guilt trip somebody into something that they don't want. And like you said, that can have very devastating effects for the children, for you, for everyone involved.
Right. And then, you have to sit there. Yeah, you got to sit there and think about, like, what happens if you do meet someone and you really love them and you know that they really want to have biological children and you can't. You know what I mean? And then that's another, guilt, or like, what if they have a kid with a surrogate, and am I really the mother, or am I really the father, or, artificial insemination, So, I don't know, there's just so many factors, and, it really has to be talked out and, come to terms with.
Agreed. Hopefully
So, we don't have to agree, but that's fine. But yeah, yes. We do agree that communication is good. Yes.
So how about this one? The writer says they just started dating and she already wants to spend less time together. What does that mean?
I think it means she's not that into you.
I think there was a movie on that.
Yeah. That's what I think. It's like,
That's definitely a possibility, and one that needs to be explored first. And then beyond that, if that's not what she's saying, it could also be just a difference in love languages. Maybe for her, quality time is pretty low. And after that first new relationship energy wears off, she needs more time to recharge.
Yeah, but if they just started dating though, so that is there a
Well,
chance for that new energy? I'm like,
mhm. It is because on the first couple dates, we're trying to impress, even if we don't realize we're trying to do that. And we're trying to get our toes wet, see if that person is compatible with us, so to speak. But I agree. That's why I said after you've explored, is it that she's into you still or not? If she's still claiming, no, 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 I really, really like you. I'm just what? Busy, or I just tend to, maybe she's like you and she's got a lot of friends or a career that she's also really busy with. And, I'm a huge Enneagram nut, and certain Enneagram numbers are not as big on needing that quality glued next to you sort of feel.
yeah, yeah.
But again, it comes out of communication, doesn't it? You need to
Right,
ask.
right. And I will tell you, I use busy to blow people off. I mean,
Yep,
because my life's
sure.
always busy, and it's just kind of like, I'm too busy for you, meaning, you're not the priority in my life, or, you're just really on my nerves and I just don't want to spend time with you. I totally get what you're saying. There's all those other factors, but time and time again, I see like this person's blowing you off and you're contributing it to other factors rather, so definitely what you're saying is absolutely
Mhm.
true, but there's a lot of truth in the fact of,
She may not
people,
she may
huh?
be blowing smoke up your ass. She may not be that into you. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of times that's a good thing. When you're sitting there and if you're like, wow, we just started dating and the first few weeks we were dating, we were going out like 2 or 3 times. Now they have time for me once every 2 weeks. And it's like you're not feeling like desired or wanted because they don't make time for you. That's pretty hurtful as well.
Well, I think that brings up a really good point. Where
Yeah.
are the priorities? Is it
Yes.
scheduled? Now, men who wanted to date me after my divorce, at first, it was every other weekend when I didn't have
Yeah.
them. But so I'm asking you to only see me once every 2 weeks. We could talk in between then.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we're going to dive into polyamory again later on. But in that scenario, one of the most common rules is like whoever I'm with right then is who has my utmost attention. And I think that's important regardless of monogamy, polyamory. So if I was with that person who I only saw every 2 weeks, when I was there, though, I was all in.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, but like you're making the desire, like if
Mhm.
she already wants to spend less time with me, but like you probably wanted to spend more time with them, but that wasn't an option because your
Sure.
kids were. But
Exactly.
they still, you still wanted, like, hey, I want to spend time with you. I want to give you more time. This is all I have, but it's like I want to spend less time with you.
Well, that's my question for this writer is where I don't know if she said those words, I want to spend less time with you, or if he got the feeling that she wants to spend less time because there's actually less time being spent. So it comes back down to me, the communication. That's a
Right.
conversation to have.
Right.
Why are we spending less time together?
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And then too, like especially if like someone's really needy and clingy, and they like
I
you're
can't.
you're
Mm-mm.
just weaning them off too,
Mhm.
and it's just kind of like, if they're blowing you off, like I know the person who sent me this question is like, they're blowing you off. I'm like, I'm just
Mhm.
telling you. And so they would probably ask them over and over, like, why are we spending less time together? And the person's just ignoring them and they're sending the same text. It's like
Well,
ignoring you
then
is a
there's your
big
sign,
answer.
boo. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So
Sometimes the writing is just on the wall.
yeah,
Don't try to
exactly.
reconfigure it to make it look like something else.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
7 billion people on the planet.
Right,
There's
exactly.
plenty others
Exactly.
who may have your love language and your style and want to be, and your availability.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, I'm going to clump all the poly ones together. Let's skip over the next one and talk about what do we do when we've got a difference of religion? How do we stop fighting over religion? Whew, it's a big
Yeah,
one.
it's a huge one. It's a huge one. So I'm Christian, and I was dating this really prominent Jewish doctor for a while. And he had told me, like I told him right from the very beginning, I'm Christian, that's who I am, that's who I always will be. I respect you tremendously. He was a very brilliant man, but I am who I am, and I respect you for you being who you are. And he's like, okay, great, we'll talk about it, we'll discuss it. And that was it. And it was just kind of like, okay, and it didn't really go anywhere. But then it was like, a few dates in, he's like, okay, I need you to start going to this class to convert to Judaism so we can get married. I'm like,
Whew.
no, like I told you, like right in the very beginning, I am who I am. I respect you for being who you are, but don't try to change me. And I mean, he was just, and he was a a forensic psychiatrist. Like, he knew better. Like, and he was being really mean and nasty in the process. And so was his family trying to get me to convert. I'm like,
Wow.
this is what they said to me, that, you know, and they said, well, if you, you know, because I'm kind of a health nut, they said, if you come over to our house, you'll probably steal vegetables from our pantry because you're Christian. I'm like, oh my God, like what kind of craziness are you into? So, you know, but then again, some of my absolute best girlfriends and whatnot are Jewish, but it was just like that was an issue in our relationship. But how do we stop fighting over religion? You know, it's just, I don't know. Why don't you answer that one a little bit more, and then I'll add a little more. What do you think?
So I was raised in an evangelical Christian household. That would have been a no-go for me in my 20s. Now I identify as an omnist, which makes things a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I embrace all paths. However, I will default back to research, since relationships is one of my things. And research shows, ironically, that arranged marriages have some of the highest satisfaction ratings on the planet. And it's not because of what you assume, the obvious, well, they're just stuck together. No, it's because they go into it with a different mindset than most of us in traditional Western culture do, that they know from the beginning, we don't know each other. I can't assume or expect anything out of you. I don't know how you like your toothpaste rolled. I don't know how you want the toilet paper on top or underneath.
Yeah.
We have to come into it with open communication and build a friendship first.
Yeah.
And so whether it is a difference in religion or politics or parenting styles, what actually matters is the how you approach it. And I have seen some beautiful multi-faith families make it work, whether it's Christianity and Judaism. Some of them are easier than others. Judaism and Islam would be tough. Christianity and Islam would be tough, but not necessarily. I have seen a few of those. It comes down to a mutuality and respect for one another.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that mankind is by nature a spiritual being.
Right.
We all want to connect with something outside of us. It's just the how that differs.
Yeah.
And so we see this even in Christianity among our denominations, right? Some Baptists may not have electric guitars and drums the way my parents' Pentecostal church does.
Yeah.
But if you go over to an AME church down the road in the African-American neighborhood, they are hopping all day, every day, right?
Yeah.
I believe that they're all worshiping the same God. It's the how, it's the what allows us to get that felt sense of transcendence in our homes and our worship places. If hymns bring you closer to God, then you do that. If getting out in nature and praying beside a river does it, then you do that. And so if my partner wants a menorah instead of a Christian tree, then damn, it's not loving to say you can't do that. And so the way that Jewish psychiatrist approached you, not cool.
Yeah.
Because it was rigid.
Right.
So we stop fighting when we have what we call compersion, a happiness for our partner's happiness, even if it's not due to us or the way that we would want it. If you can't do that, then this relationship is doomed.
Right, right. And you know, the thing is, by all means, he has the right to want to marry a Jewish woman and raise his kids in the Jewish faith and have the Jewish traditions. But don't drag me into that. That's what you want. So know what you want, and don't, because you lust after me, don't try to drag me in and make me something I'm not. Find the Jewish girl that you want to marry.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And but, it's so interesting, like, how big of a deal is it with religion? So when I was living in Europe, I dated just very briefly a guy from Turkey, and he was Muslim, and he was so wonderful to me, and he was so good looking, but I just had this incredible anxiety while we were dating, like, he's going to try to convert me. And so I talked to a Muslim, like, mutual friend of his that was just very kind to me, and I said, what are your thoughts on this? And she says to me, she's like, ask him about his sisters and if they wear burqas. And he's like, oh yes, every woman in my family. I'm like, okay, it's like, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm not that open-minded, like, because I just had this anxiety, like, you're going to try to make me something I'm not, like, I'm completely open to friendship or whatnot, but, I can't, I would never be part of your family. I would never be part of, does that make sense?
It does, because there's not a mutuality of autonomy there. That's what I'm saying. If he tries to convert you, then he's taking away your autonomy, and that's a no-go.
Right, right. So, I mean, I think in certain cases it can, I think, definitely know, like, there's people who try to, they meet somebody and then they try to convert them, and again, it comes down to communication. Like, I would be, non-denominational Christian, I'd be completely okay dating someone who was Catholic. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I'd even be okay going to the Catholic Church,
Mm-hmm.
And if I decided to convert, to me, Christianity is Christianity, whether it's Christian, Catholic,
Right.
Baptist, Lutheran.
Protestant, Catholic, doesn't matter. Yeah.
I know I just offended like tons of your listeners by saying
did
that.
not.
But, and mine too, but, trust me. But it's just kind of like, if it's, respecting the differences, then that's,
that's how big of a deal is it for you? And
yeah.
Like
and then
said,
again, too, people, people grow and change. Like if you sit there and you look at the generations of people who get married, go to church, it's, typically the older generations. And it's so interesting that you were talking about arranged marriage, because when I was in India, I was there, and, there's lots of arranged marriage there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of questions, and I actually came across another statistic, and I talked to the locals about it. They said they have the highest staying together rates, but not necessarily the satisfaction. And it was really, really interesting, and I talked to, a lot of people who were traveling across India and backpackers and stuff like that. And so they were staying in all of these homes with arranged marriages. And, we were talking like, well, how is the chemistry, or like, I've worked with, different people who do have arranged marriage, and it's just kind of like, well, we do this on this week and we do this. And it's just kind of like, sometimes I feel like, when I've come across that, it's like the passion might not be there, even though it's like, we're going to stay together no matter what. But yeah, so when I was in India, it was just the men that I encountered were very sexually aggressive towards me. And, I was talking to these other people, I think they were from South Africa, and they said, whenever we were just having this very philosophical conversation, like whenever you have to suppress desire, and I wrote about it in my book, and like, then both of my books have been more popular in India than anywhere. And I'm like, oh God, like my book, like this is the exact opposite of, the traditional arranged marriage book. Like I did not envision this at all. But, I talked about, like we talked about suppressing desire. And so this particular couple I was talking to, they had just traveled across India. And so it's not like an Airbnb, but it's something like that. And like they literally had just went all through India and stayed with numerous families who had arranged marriages. And it was just the lack of desire energy really impacted them and impacted the way they thought. And so I looked into it that way as well. So that's something else, to really think about. Desire, and we'll talk about it later. Desire is so huge. So it's like, I really love this person and I really desire them and I desire to spend my life with them. And we have this difference in religion, and maybe I wanted to, have my life a certain way, but them being in my life enriches it enough that I can be flexible and I can modify who I am because of the desire. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Long answer. There's not a perfect answer. Yeah.
How do you stop fighting over religion? Well, hopefully you don't start in the first place.
Yeah.
You know yourself, and that should be an easy conversation on day 1, 2, or 3,
Yeah.
Which is another big point that I just want to put through all of this. Relationships are not nearly as hard as we make them when you have the important conversations up front. But I think we tend to put them off for lots of reasons, and that causes big problems.
Right. And that's mutual conversations, not you talking at the person and you thinking that they agree with you. Like it's back and forth communication. Like we both are going to respect each other's differences and respect what we're similar on as well. And it's like, if there's that commitment in the communication as well, it's like, oh, we talked about it. Like, yeah, you talked at me for like 2 hours and I ignored you,
Good point.
Yeah.
So this is a huge one, especially in Christian and other Abrahamic faiths. Do you believe in soulmates?
I believe in soulmates for certain people. I believe certain people are definitely with their soulmates. But I don't think, I don't know if you believe in reincarnation or not, but I don't know, like everyone like living in this particular generation or this era, they're not all going to be with their soulmates. But I definitely come across people and it's like, oh, they're absolutely soulmates. And this morning I was just watching a YouTube about this couple, and they'd been married for 35 years. And she said at 14 years old, she just said, I had this big impression. She's like, it was from God. Like that's the man you're going to marry. Like when Celine Dion and her husband is like, from the time she was 12 years old, like that is my person. So I believe that certain people definitely have soulmates, but not everyone. And I think if we for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe there is such thing as reincarnation. I really truly don't know, but maybe we do have a soulmate in another life, or, some people say a friend's a soulmate. One of my dogs was my soul dog, he wasn't my soulmate, but my soul dog, but not for everyone, but definitely for some. What are your thoughts?
I actually don't, at least not in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah.
I don't believe that there is one perfect person out there for you. And if you somehow miss him or her, you're fucked.
Yeah.
I feel like that opinion or that worldview of, I think it causes a lot of issues for a lot of young Christian, Jewish, Islamic children out there who are petrified that they are one prayer away from missing this person. And that if they marry the wrong person, a lot of times churches will say, once you're married, that now becomes God's will for you.
Right.
I've seen a lot of men and women trapped in abusive situations that they should not be, because they somehow believe that they screwed up their predestination and caused God's will to change for them.
Right.
And so if we are using that term of the word soulmate, no, I don't buy into that. Do I think that there are some people who you just seem to have this crazy connection with from day one? The people that, like, you're talking about, who just knew. And if reincarnation is a thing, or even if it's not, even if it is just this one, that connection is mind, body, spirit, soul fulfilling. Sure. Yeah. So if you're using the Celts have a word for it, anamkara. It's that soul friend. And it transcends just sex. Yeah, I believe there are soulmates for us. There's twin flames for us. I'll save that for a whole nother podcast. Yeah. But I think I could have 100,000 soulmates.
Sure. Well, I think too, like, if you believe, like, okay, there's a person out there meant for me, and it's like, if you're putting this pressure on yourself, like, oh, like, what happens if, like, I turn right and he turned left on the wrong block and we missed, or he and she, whatever. I think that if someone's meant to be, they're going to keep recircling in your life over and over until it's like, not only are they going to be meant to be in your life circumstances are going to bring you together over and over, or maybe even giving you glimpses of.
I agree.
Yeah, and so that girl, when she was 14, she kept talking about, he was 20, so they're like 6 years apart. So she kept talking about over the years how they would keep running into each other. And then she was like, I don't know, 22 or something, they got married, and they were still giddy about each other. They were just adorable.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I believe that there are certain people, and then too, I went to San Diego State for undergrad, and they made us go. I mean, that's one of the things that was so good about San Diego State. I definitely preferred the education at San Diego State over UVA. Is they made us go out and do so many field exercises, and they made us go into the nursing homes. And I would talk to people getting ready to die about their partner and whatnot, and asking people 90 years old, and and it's like, how do you feel about dying? It's like, I'm so excited I get to be with my soulmate. And so then I was asking, do you think there could have been anybody else in the 7 billion people who were your soulmates? Nope. So it's just, that was such a perspective as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
My answer, yes and no. Sure.
Yes.
Depends upon for me, the intent that you're using that word with.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to stress it, because like you, I do believe that the people tend to come around. I absolutely believe in synchronicities and serendipities, and like that movie Cloud Atlas. I mean, people will come back in over and over and over.
Right. There's a good book, it's called God Winks too, and it kept talking about how these signs and whatnot come into your life. So,
but don't stress it.
Yeah, exactly. And if this person is your soulmate, it happens naturally, it happens easy. It's like, oh, I've been waiting for you, and we work together. And no, I'm not talking about physically work, our relationship works, our time together works. And it's like, it's not oil and water all the time. It's, we're mixing together. Yeah. It's not, don't put that pressure on yourself, because I mean, that's just coming at it from a very wrong mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that brings you to an interesting one. Am I ever going to meet someone? I find that question so odd. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and I think that means, I think I might have had two questions in one. I think that might came up with, how do I know if a person is into me, and am I ever going to meet someone? And I just, because I know who that person was, it's like, I know their perspective, where they were coming from. And I think that, I think I kind of, I vaguely answered whenever they messaged me that. And it's just kind of like,
I hear longing in that question.
Yeah, but it was just kind of like, I think that is what they were saying. Am I ever going to meet someone that I'm really compatible with? And, like my advice was, well, if you're settling with someone you're not compatible with, then no,
Right.
But I mean, I definitely think, I'm a fan of expectations. I write about it a lot in my book, but, if you have expectations, which I sometimes think is synonymous with standards, you limit the type of people that you're going to meet. So it might take you a bit longer to meet like a really good compatible partner. It's like, am I ever going to meet someone? Yeah, you're going to meet 1,000 people, but am I ever going to meet someone that's right for me? I think the more standards and the more expectations you have from life, the longer you have to wait.
Agreed.
Because there's less availability.
True. And I constantly tell my clients that are, dying, waiting for their soulmate, their twin flame, whatever to show up. You gotta get out there. If you're not casting a wide enough net, what the hell are you expecting? I knew a man, get back to the soulmate thing, right? People read the Bible and they're like, well, what about like Isaac and Rebecca? Well, are you ready to send your servant out on a donkey to walk up to your family, your extended cousin's town and ask for a bride? I mean, they were still taking steps, even though they believed that was God's intended. I'll leave that one alone.
Yeah.
And he basically showed up with a bunch of gold in his pocket, handed her a nose ring and some bracelets and was like, all right, let's get hitched. At least he was taking action on it. I've known a couple people that were like, well, if God, intends a wife for me, he'll bring her to me, that whole predestination bullshit. And I'm like, well, yep, but you're just going to sit in your house every day playing video games and expect her to knock on your door and say, hi, I'm God's beloved for you.
Right.
Let's go.
Right.
That's not the way it works.
Right. I mean, you have to be available, and I think so many times, especially when I was like younger, like, you go out to a bar, you go out to a dance club or whatever, and it's like, but you're meeting people and it's like, okay, well, I got to meet somebody because this is my limited pool of people, and you're putting that pressure on yourself to settle as well. Mm-hmm. So, it's like, I think getting out there could include volunteer work. I think it could include church.
Exactly.
It could include work, although that doesn't apply to me. Mm-hmm. It could include the gym. It could include walking your dog on the beach. Like, those are the things that getting out there. But when you're like, okay, this is where I'm getting out to, like, I'm going out to my latest happy hour bar, and then it's like, I'm putting my pressure on myself to meet somebody here, so for me, it's just, I'm extremely picky, Tamara, like, and it's just kind of like,
no.
if I'm, no, well, I have standards and expectations, yes, and it's like, if I don't know, this guy keeps bugging the shit out of me, and it's just kind of like, I keep blowing him off, like my no response is a response, and it's just putting that pressure on yourself to get out there, like, I have to be with someone, is a downfall as well. It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
If this person's not equally matched and this person, is not educationally matched or socioeconomically matched, and it's like, I want to have an intellectual conversation. I want to travel the world, and I don't want to be your sugar mama. Like, it's not happening. Or, I want to own a certain type of home, and I don't want to just buy it for you. And it's like, if I'm putting my expectation, like, okay, I went here and this was the availability. All right, then I have to settle and just take that. So, yeah, I think, first of all, I think the first and foremost thing, the most important thing is, no, this is who I am, and this is what works for me, and this is what I want, and this is what I desire. And then, when you do get out there, like, okay, I'm volunteering, like, nope, sorry, you're not it. Like, oh, well, maybe, like, yeah, maybe then we get to know each other a little bit better,
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Explore
your special interests, broaden.
Yeah. And especially go out and do the things that you like to do and the things that you're interested in. You know what I mean? Like, if traveling is really important to you, I'm leaving for Australia tomorrow, so just FYI, that's why I keep bringing it up, travel. But it's, if you're, it's like, you get out there and you meet someone who's also passionate about travel, great. That's a very commonality that you have together,
Agreed.
Yeah.
So how about this one? Do you have premonitions about a partner? Like that Savage Garden song, I Knew I Loved You Before I Met You.
Okay, well, yeah. You want to start that one? Or is it my turn to start? Whose turn is it?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. This goes back to soulmates, and I think it is such a beautiful, idealized, romantic idea. Now, see, even as an omnist, I do believe in metaphysics, and I think it is absolutely possible. Could you have a dream? Could you have a vision? Yes, I believe the universe, the divine works that way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
However, please still pay attention to your head and your logic.
Right.
Don't just go off. Well, I had this vision. We're meant to be together forever. I've had men say that to me. Actually, even use that song. So
Yeah.
it gives me a little bit of a giggle. They claim that they saw me in a vision. That doesn't necessarily mean, boo-boo, we're going to be lifelong partners.
Yeah.
If that's the case. So sure, why not? What about you?
I think it could be possible. I don't think it's the norm. And I think so many people hold on to, something like, well, you said this one time, like, I don't even remember saying that, like whatever that I said that it meant that. But it's like, sometimes it's like, I think you have to trust your gut. Like sometimes, I have a gut feeling about that person. You don't even really know, but then they keep recycling in your life, and maybe you dream about them, so that is possible. I want to definitely don't put all your eggs in that basket, but it is definitely possible.
So, yep, we're on the same page with that one.
Yeah.
Moving on. What level of privacy is okay in relationship? This is a biggie. Comes up a lot in couples counseling.
Right. So I think if it doesn't impact your intimacy, you know what I mean? Like you and your partner have to have authentic intimacy, right? So if there's things that you've done in your past and your background, and it does not affect, because I've my patient clientele include, special forces and stuff like that. It's like, some of those guys are never going to talk about what they do. And if it doesn't affect your relationship now, and you can have this honest, authentic relationship, and like that's part of you, but that's a private part of you you don't ever want to open. Great. That's great. But then it's like, okay, well, I do have this thing that caused me PTSD, and I am having nightmares, and you're sleeping next to me. I need you to share this with me because it's affecting us and it's affecting me, So that's an issue as well, So like when you sit there and say, like, what kind of privacy do you need? Like, I don't want anyone in the bathroom with me. I don't, I got all these dogs and they go in the bathroom with me. Sometimes they're okay. I kind of prefer even no, stay out of the bathroom. But, I would feel violated if someone was going through my phone. Like I when I wake up in the middle of the night, I put a dream on my phone, or I have random thoughts that I, think like, I'm going to use this for a paragraph in my book or a line in my book. So I'll like voice type it. If someone wants to read it, like, my God, she like has hardcore schizophrenia, because it doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to it. Those are my private thoughts that I want to use for, something down the line that you might not understand anything about. So I would feel like a big violation of privacy. So have privacy. I don't think I need to know every single thing about you. I think if we can, communicate about our values, our morals, where we want, what we want together. And, then also too, it's like if you sit there and say, okay, I have experienced things in life that I don't ever want to share with, but it won't affect us. Like, okay, great. I'll listen if you ever want to share, and then too, a lot of the guys I see, I predominantly see men. It's just kind of like, I can't tell my wife this because of this. And I'm like, I think, like you're telling me, and you're sitting there saying, I can't tell her because she's a woman. Like, I'm a woman too, and it's like, in her head, she's thinking all kinds of other stuff, so it's like, she might be able to handle more than what you can think. And I see that with guys a lot of times, like, I'm not going to tell her this to protect her or whatever. I think, again, that needs to be defined as well. You know what I mean? And then too, if someone's going through your phone, like, especially now, like my iPhone or whatever, I probably have 1,000 numbers in there. 90% of the people I don't even know. It's like, oh, who's got number is this? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, somebody called me once and, my iPhone automatically registers, probably a realtor that I didn't want to hear from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually tend to agree. Obviously, every couple has to define that according to their own moral code, worldview, etc. But if you don't have a good reason to need to know something, then I think it needs to be left alone.
Right. And I think too, like as we're talking about this, like, I keep giving like the good solutions of like, oh, well, you have to communicate about it. Well, I think it's important that we bring up the fact, like, okay, what if you say, hey, you going through my phone is a violation of my privacy? And they do, that's hurtful. And, that's a boundary issue. And, hopefully you're just dating and you can talk it out. But if you are just dating, move on. And if you're married, it's like, you got to deal with that, because if they're going to violate your boundaries there, where else are they going to violate your boundaries? And if you sit there and you say, hey, this is a violation of trust, and then they're doing it, they're showing you that they can't be trusted as well. And that's a sign of an unhealthy relationship.
I agree. But if that partner has good reason to be going through that phone, then that issue needs to be dealt with before we're violating boundaries. So if
Yes.
she believes that you are cheating, then the conversation needs to be about infidelity and why her radar is up.
Right. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
what level of privacy? Well, it depends upon you, but I think both of us prefer more privacy than not because it's just gross to feel when you get married, you do not hand over your autonomy to your spouse.
Yeah.
So, short of
Right.
that.
Right. And then, that's the thing too, like you have to be a you and you have to go do your own things. It's like, oh, hey, if you do everything together, you share every single thing, you get boring after a while. Like you're telling the
Unless you
same.
both want that, but I'm going to tell you statistically, incredibly rare.
Yeah, well, and it gets boring. It's boring. I don't know.
Not
All
for
right.
the couples that love it, but
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
but again, very rare. So for
Yeah.
the most
Yeah.
for the most of us, it will be boring.
All right.
I'm going to skip over because one kind of goes along with this. Let's talk about what happens when you feel like you can't do things spontaneously, like have a friend come over or to go out. This writer feels like she has to ask permission first. And when people do come over, she feels like she has to tiptoe around telling him that that's what she's planning. Yikes.
To me, that goes hand in hand with jealousy and control Like, it's just, I like as a person, like, obviously you have to deal with this with your patients and you have to be empathetic and you have to come up with all kinds of, ways to communicate and, well, why is this? Why, and I've talked to women and she's like, he can't have any other friends besides me and I can't have any other friends
Mm-hmm.
besides him. And it's like the concept that that's unhealthy. They think that I am out of my mind. But, it's just, you have to sit there and think about it. Like, step back and sit there and think, like, let's just say if you were to do that, it's like you're treating that person like a child. Like, oh, you can't go to the store. And it's like, that's what you tell your, you know, preteen. You know what I mean? Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm not a child. I'm a human being. I'm an adult. I think for myself, and it's like, do you want a low functioning person? Are you a low functioning person that you want an equal? Those are some of the thoughts that would go through
Mm-hmm.
my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. She goes on to say, I mean, really, to me, this is the cycle of communication.
Yeah.
So, because the conversations don't often go well, it looks like she's starting to pull back because she feels like she's tiptoeing. But then, if they don't talk about it beforehand, he's going to grumble, and then that leads her to feel like she's tiptoeing even more. That's what I mean. It becomes a vicious cycle. I'm anxious. Now you're irritated. I become more anxious.
Right.
So she brings in the Enneagram, and I want to approach that a little bit because a lot of my listeners are Enneagram literate, and she says that she's a 4. That's the
Mhm.
bohemian, the romantic, the individualist. So big feels, lots of wanting connection and independence.
Yeah.
And he is a counterphobic 6. So
Yeah.
6s are the loyalists. In this regard, they're going to appear complete opposite.
Right.
Whenever he's upset, he pushes back rather than anxiously pursuing like a typical 6 would because he's counterphobic. So counter intimate is another way of looking at it. So this is a tough dynamic. She's wanting to go up north, visit her family, or any issue. It doesn't have to just be about this. So how can they better approach it? Well,
Right.
here's where I think the Enneagram or other relational tools are super useful because you already have a cheat sheet on his lens. You know that as a loyalist, he craves this felt sense of security more than anything. In fact, his personal growth is from fear to faith or to trust, is another way of
Right.
putting it in non religious terms. So, where is he struggling? The questions I'd be asking him if you were my partner is, baby, who has hurt you before that has made you feel like they're going every time that they leave, are they going to cheat on you? What's the big worry here? And if he
Right.
can't identify that, then that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. And then vice versa. Now you're going to need to share it from your opinion. Why is it important to you, especially as a 4? Talk to him about the feelings that you're craving, connecting with your loved ones, etc.
Right. Right. Yeah, and and I kind of just answered from my point of view. I am empathetic of others. It's just kind of like, if you have a partner who's just like highly anxious and maybe has social anxiety, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to have my friends over and they're going to be in the living room and you can go into the
Mhm.
bedroom or you can, do your thing. So it's like you're still so still somehow is there a win-win compatible, and it's like sometimes you have to, again, you have to be with somebody that you can have somewhat of an intellectual balanced relationship. I was out with my friends the other day, and she's like, my husband's a genius. I'm like, yes, but you have a lot of emotional intelligence. And so it's like, somehow there's a balance, but if you can't have those conversations, it's just going to like make you crazy. But it's just kind of like, how can we have a win-win?
Yep. I think the win here is that she can't tiptoeing around it isn't going to help, especially knowing that he is a loyalist. He worries about safety, whether he's conscious of it or not. And so how can I help you feel more safe? And if we come down to the fact that I just can't, then we're going to have to agree to disagree on how often we're going out, babe, because you're right. Everyone's needs need to be met.
Right.
That would be a tough relationship to stay in, but don't tiptoe, girl. Approach it. And if he can't approach it, there's a really good book on what it's called. It's called A Flight from Intimacy. I would recommend it's the opposite of codependent. It's counterdependent. And that's very true for a lot of people, especially stereotypically speaking men.
Right. And if it's not a fear issue, it's a control issue. It's not good to be controlled. Like you're an adult again. But the other thing is, if you feel like, because I'm pretty good with money, and I've dated some people who, trust me, in this when I was younger, and they're not good with money. It's like I'm always budgeting, okay, this much money this day, this much money that day, or whatever. If I feel like I need to control someone, like because they're gonna go out and spend like crazy, that's a sign to move on. Like if I can't, it's like I just need to. If I feel like I need to fix someone or help change them, that's a sign. Move on. Yeah, too. So if you're like so incompatible that you feel like immediately, it's like, I don't want this person to do that. I don't want this person. Okay, great. Move on. Be your own person,
Find someone that you don't feel that way for. I agree.
Yeah.
Let's start moving towards sex. Because we've got a few questions on sex and monogamy and polyamory that I want to hit before we wrap it up. Let's start off with, let's talk about porn.
Okay.
How do you know when a partner's request for photographic, quote unquote, material becomes concerning? Is it ever normal, or is it a definite sign of what she's calling sexual addiction?
So should I assume that that's a pornographic picture of her?
No, I wouldn't.
Right. So, I guess, because when I was reading that question, and I just briefly read it, because again, I told you, I told you this before.
Come in raw.
Yeah, come in raw. But I read that, I read through everything once, make sure I understood everything, But I was, first of all, thinking is that like a picture of her?
Probably starts out that way, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm in the military, and I know a lot of girls and guys or whatever, they'll go and get like those boudoir, am I saying it right? Shots, and it's kind of like, the sexy lingerie, stuff like that. And, that kind of means a lot to someone, but they're requesting it. What are they requesting? You know what I mean? Are they, I don't understand what they're requesting. If, to me, it's why are you requesting, are you requesting it from me? Who are you requesting it from? Are you requesting that we bring it into the relationship? To me, the question's just not very clear, I guess.
I don't think it really matters. What's your take on photographic material, on owning or having in any form of the word porn?
Okay. So, so one of the things I do is I'm huge into education, like preventative education. And I talk to people a lot about porn addiction. And I have all these medical pictures, and they're, by all means, they're graphic drawings of the anatomy and physiology. It's not pictures. But, I show people, porn addiction, and I show them the vessels in the penis, and I'm this applies to the clitoris as well. My population is men. And, porn addiction is becoming one of the causes of erectile dysfunction for guys in their late teens and 20s. And there was this podcast, and if I could track it down, I would love to. But it talked about the number of different images that a guy in his late teens had seen versus a guy in his 80s. And it was tens of thousands more because of smartphones and whatnot. And so this is one of the big things I talk to my patients on, very first day we meet them. That way they know they can talk to me about anything. But so it's what I tell them. I'm I don't, me as Jamie, I do not care what you're doing on a Friday night. As long as you're not suicidal, or homicidal, or doing anything to harm yourself or others, I don't care. I do not care. I care about my life and my bubble and my dogs, and I care about my work. Of course I do in general. But am I wondering what Mr. Smith is doing on some Friday night?
What if it was your partner, Jamie?
No. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. But okay, sorry. I'm getting there, Tamara. I'm getting there. But so what I do is I move on to that and I say, there are consequences to porn, and the consequences are, so I tell the guys this. I said, if I'm having chocolate cake, chocolate ice cream, chocolate candy, chocolate milk, chocolate soda, chocolate gum all day long, every day, eventually, what stimulates me? What turns me on? What Pandora's box do I have? And I've taken care of 22-year-old men who've said, the only thing that turns me on is imagining raping a woman. So where is it in that spectrum? Like, if a spectrum was like, oh, hey, I'm going to be on a trip and I want some pictures of you to think, it's like, that, or is it like, we're watching porn every day or every night before we go to bed. Like, like that's my everyday life. I met guys that like 3 apps on their phone. There's consequences to that. I used to go dance. I took dance lessons, and I met this woman. Her and I would dance together. Just like it was like line dance lessons, and just briefly talk. And so I didn't see her for a long time, and she came back, and she pulls me aside. She's like, "I need to talk to you." And she's like, "I said, yeah, I haven't seen you in a long time." She marries this guy, and he's very religious, Tamara, religious, and he doesn't want to have premarital sex. So she marries him. They try to have sex a couple times in like their 9 months of marriage. They can't. She finds out that he's a major porn addict, and he has literally masturbated so much to porn that nothing else turns him on.
Yeah.
And I even deal with it. Like, so there's a chapter in my book where, and I keep bringing this up, but the girl, Sarah's the main character, her friend and her are out for a run, and she's talking about she's dating this guy and they have sex all the time, and he cannot ejaculate. And like, he's always trying to make her feel bad about it. His issue is he's addicted to porn on the side. So again, I think, it comes down to the individual couple, like, hey, we're both equally, addicted to porn, and like, that's our preference, or we're both like super conservative and we'd never ever have any open mind, or, what, you've done this here and there or whatever, but it doesn't consume my life. It's not all consuming, or it's not mostly consuming, or I don't prefer this over you. I mean, there's so many factors to think about.
I agree.
Okay, I went off on a tangent there. Come back into normalcy. Bring me back down. So yes.
So, yeah, statistically, rates of incidence of pornography, and we'll just stick with porn for now, being a factor in relationship distress is definitely on the rise. You're right. With the rise of technology, we used to have first it was like playing cards, then it was Playboy, then it was Penthouse, then we had DVDs, or VHS.
Well, you forgot the VHSs. VHS. Like 7th grade. Don't you remember that?
You're right. And now it is on our phone. So certainly the amount of visual stimulation that young men and women are seeing is on the rise, and it is causing issues. However, and a huge however here, proportionally to the population, it is still an outlier, even in clinical populations, to see anorgasmia, erectile dysfunction, etc. among, we see a higher incidence. Obviously, they don't show up on our couch for no reason.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of relationships out there are not struggling to the point where people are doing themselves tissue damage with pornography.
No. That was just, that was an extreme example.
I just want to make it clear, and I know you knew that, and I agree with you, because obviously the men and women that come into my clinic are struggling with a lot of sexual distress and dysfunction. And sure, porn is a high correlation, and that is one of the first things I will ask them. How often are you jacking off?
Right.
When we're talking about sexual script issues, what are you looking at?
Right.
Yes. However, the person asked, can it be normal? Sure. We are all visual creatures. It is normal to get off seeing someone else get undressed or engage in a sexual act. It is statistically very normal for men, especially, yes, men in the military, but men in general, to ask for photographs and videos of their girlfriends and their wives. So statistically, like you asked me, that word normal is tricky.
Yeah.
It's common and, yes, considered normal. The American Psychological Association's definition of healthy sexuality is when it is mutually pleasurable. So it comes back to communication. If you're not comfortable with any sex act, which would include taking photos of yourself, that needs to be a conversation. I like that you said, what is he doing with it? Why does he need it? How often does he need it? And you're right. The big thing for me is it causing an issue, just like with privacy, with our relationship? Some
Sure.
men that I have dated could jack off 4 times a day and still have sex with me that night. And I felt like they were truly there.
Yeah.
They weren't having sex with a highlight reel. Other men, if they jack off once that morning, it was like your chocolate analogy. They didn't want it that night.
Right. Yeah.
You have to know yourself. You have to know your relationship. You need to weigh it against your religious morals, your worldview. As a feminist, I have whole other issues with porn at times. So there's a lot to unpack there. Can it be normal? Yes. And we actually don't even use the addiction word anymore when it regarding sex, but we can talk about impulsive and compulsive issues. And if he's jacking off and he's not, able to work and he's not able to perform sexually with you, then lay people might call that an addiction.
Right. Right. And so, I think too, so many times we lose track of like innocence within an individual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, there can be longevity with that as well. And it was really interesting because I was taking care of one patient who was a porn addict, and he had sex with like over 200 women. And then my very next patient, I was treating her for postpartum depression, and she was on like baby number 4. She was LDS. And it was funny because I told you in our last interview that I've had a higher than number proportion of Satan worshipers and LDS because like of referrals, it's just because,
Sure.
it's how I approach it, so I was talking to her, and she's like baby 4, and they're like 3 of them are still not even in kindergarten. And so she's like, I'm here for medication for postpartum depression. I get this every time. Just give me my drugs. And I'm like, okay. She's like, don't give me anything that affects my sex drive. And I'm like, so I'm sitting here and like her hair's all matty and messy, and she's wearing a t-shirt, and she's like leaking breast milk and wearing sweats. And I'm like, oh. So I'm like, so I just got through talking to a guy who's just depressed, has no more interest in sex, and then to this extreme. And I'm like, so how many times are you guys having sex? Because her husband, had a very, very busy job, probably worked at least 60 hours a week. She's like, oh, about 10 times a week. And I'm like, what? Really? Where? Like how? Like it was just it was surprising, but it was like something about how, and it made me look at things from, multiple perspectives. I'm always very open-minded, but it was just kind of like they were obviously very aligned on multiple things, but the innocence that they preserved in their relationship was going for the longevity. Does that make sense as well? There was no burnout. There was no boring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's a lovely thing to strive for.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to two, and I'm always a little concerned when someone's so rigid and so black and white. And so this is wrong. Absolutely not. One way of thinking is like, I think you have some skeletons.
Right. I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So last question, probably before I move into polyamory, how do you best handle intimacy after taking a loving look at and unpacking your trauma, especially when ideas around it transform and change? So, for example, reading the rest of this, a lot of my clients that I tend to work with, probably 50-50 men and women, they've had sexual distress, dysfunction, abuse, molestation, etc. in their past, right?
Yeah.
Now, when they go on to try and have quote unquote normal sexual relationships with people later on, sometimes it rears its ugly head. How do we talk about that with our new partner?
Yeah. And then too, what happens if the trauma happens after you're in a relationship? Like, there's a rape or something after the relationship. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so like what, are you thinking about like child molestation or like a prior rape, or just trauma in the fact, like just a lot of verbal, abuse, neglect, like, what is the trauma?
It doesn't matter. She doesn't say what her trauma is.
Yeah.
But even if it's non-sexual trauma, a lot of times what happens is a woman's sexual script can change. What used to turn her on, now that she's unpacked and healed her trauma, no longer does.
Uh-huh.
And vice versa. Sometimes the erotic mind creates new things that it likes to enjoy in the bedroom.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. And two, is it 100% related to the trauma? Are you losing interest in your partner? Are there any other factors as well playing into that as well? And then it's just kind of like, how did your partner handle you dealing with your trauma, or like if you're in therapy for a trauma, were they supportive? Were they there for you? Did you come into the relationship perhaps kind of broken and they felt like they needed to be a fixer, and now you've dealt with your trauma and you feel strong and empowered and they can't handle that? Those are just some of the thoughts that are going through my head.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when I'm thinking about in broad strokes, just to give an example, so a lot of women who have had trauma in their past, we've all been groomed to be the good girl, the placater. So 88% of women prefer to be dominated anyway. Well, you add in molestation, rape, doesn't matter. And she's probably not as assertive as she would be. Or some women go the exact opposite route and become hella dominant and only dominant. And so after working with the therapist, they find out, oh shit, I actually like, for example, to be more of a switch. Sometimes I may want to say no to you in the bedroom, and you're not used to hearing that. How do I start approaching that without cutting off our sex life?
Right.
What do I do when I've healed my trauma and now I'm a different person sexually than I was before?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think it's such a, it applies to sex, but it applies to other things as well. How do you view the entire relationship? But I guess it's just kind of hard to pinpoint. Like before I would do everything you wanted me to do, and now I'm setting boundaries. Now I'm saying no. Does this person respect their boundaries? Were they supporting you? As you were getting your trauma healed, are they open-minded, or they're like, I can only look at you through this small paradigm and I can never have a shift?
Yeah, I think you're right. A healthy relationship just has room for flow. It does, and open communication, especially about things in the bedroom. And I remember sex is about so much more than just an orgasm.
Right.
Or else it's a conversation just by other means. And so as we grow and evolve, you talked about the 7-year cycle before, we're all constantly growing and evolving. Social sex lives. And if you don't have a partner that can flow with you, then the relationship has bigger issues.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, sometimes, like I love Brene Brown, and, I think how she, talks about shame and like a shame gremlin and how we hold this shame, I've heard statistics 1 in 3, 1 in 4 women have been, sexually abused, assaulted, molested, something in their life, and men 1 in 6. And I think the people who do hold that shame, and by that, I mean the word rape, abuse, molestation, it's not a nice word. It's like, this shouldn't happen. So we hold that shame of that association within us, which we shouldn't. You know what I mean? That shame belongs to the perpetrator. But I think because we hold that like shame and silent, or that shame gremlin, that, sometimes we just automatically think, oh, we're alone in this, and that our partner or the person who's with us, they had the perfect family, they had their perfect life, and I can't be my whole authentic self, like, because I'm damaged, but they're perfect. And, having that vulnerability conversation with them as well, it's just kind of like, using perfect and from a perfect family, and I'm not perfect. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does. So to me, sacred sexuality is really one where we're all able to bring all of us to the table.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's been your gremlins in the past and what you've been working on and healing. So I would encourage this writer to absolutely continue working on stepping up and being assertive about all your things. It just means being open and talking.
Yeah.
Then he or she is not the right one for you, boo.
Right. Yeah.
So let's tackle, because we're already going over, let's hit the big ones, probably almost kind of all in one, but let's start with what do we do when somebody wants an open relationship and the other person's like, no.
Right.
Do they get a divorce? Is that an automatic no?
Yeah. So I think too, because you have the sacred sexuality podcast, your specialization in mental health is human sexuality. So I think probably this is like more your field of expertise than me. Yeah, that's more your paradigm. And, sometimes even I have to stop and reflect and okay, I am in such a domain about my population. There's a whole other world, but it's that's something to really think about. And it's, do you want to start on that one, or do you want me to?
I can start. So I'm going to fold it into another one where someone says, is Is being polycurious a thing? Yes. Once again, human beings are, I said, we're spiritual creatures. We're also sexual creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And monogamy it has been around forever. So has polyamory and polygamy. It's in the Bible over and over and over and over and over. That's why, FLDS, not LDS, has still kept polygamy. Monogamy is a controversial subject for modern sex researchers because we know that human beings, the second that we say I do, your sex drive doesn't go away.
Right.
And so absolutely, we still think about that person walking by and thoughts are going to flow through your head. Now, lots of people enter into polyamory for all sorts of reasons. And my biggest thing I want to say off the cuff is you need to know why. Are you wanting more sex? Are you wanting different sex? Are you wanting both? And have you considered the ramifications of such? Because it is not just, polyamory is an umbrella term, but it is not typically just having sex that's swinging. Most people end up in some sort of a relationship, polyamory, multiple love. So that is probably going to be a deal breaker for someone who is absolutely monogamous. I will say statistically, very few people, about a quarter of people are in conscious non-monogamous relationships in some form or another. So it is very statistically common that way. So 25 to 30% of people are engaging in some sort of sexual behavior that their other partner knows about outside of the bonds of monogamy. But that's a lot of people. We're just not talking about it. On the flip side, though, very few people are completely polyamorous, meaning they have no problems with their partner having sex with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So if somebody feels like they're going to be, they would like to be in an open relationship and the other person is completely monogamous and it is not just a passing thing, this person feels that they need it. I don't care if we're talking polyamory, kink, whatever. That's going to be a tough thing for that relationship because there's going to be resentments and a lack of trust on both sides. What do you think?
Oh, you know what? So this was really interesting. And I just got through reading the book, Think and Grow Rich, which is one of the best books of all time. Like, can I come at this at a different approach? So we have to think about sexual energy, and does sexual energy always have to be used as sexual energy, just a sexual act?
Exactly.
So that was one of the thoughts that I was thinking when I saw this question pop up. I think it's so important to know yourself and know your values and then know, okay, this is me. Like for me, Jamie, I'm a serially monogamous person. Maybe one day I'll be completely monogamous once I meet the right person. But it's like, okay, I dated you for a while, it didn't work out, I'm moving on. You know what I mean? But it's like when I'm with one person, it's like I'm a partner with that person. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that outside of me that I'm not okay with you being you if it doesn't, impact us or impacts our relationship. And having that open mentality. I will tell you in my experience with people who are into swinging and then again, and I thought about this too, like if you watch, some of the FLDS, it's like those women are very, grateful that they have a, like a sister wife and stuff like that. Like, the interviews that I've seen and they seem to be pretty authentic. And I think in our job, and you and I definitely have discernment. So, personally, when I've had, like friends or coworkers who are polyamorous, I've had very few respect my boundaries. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like you're getting that call at 2 a.m. This is like years ago. And it's like, no, my boundaries, who I am. And, they bring it up a couple times, like, this is a boundary violation. I'm sorry, you cannot be in my life anymore. Like, just done. So it's like, it's like, I'm okay with, if we go to lunch and we're hanging out and you're saying, this is me and this is how it affects my life. And I'm like, great, this is me and this is how it affects my life. And it's, we're having this great conversation. We hang out and everything's cool. I think there's a shortage of good, kind, loving, giving people. So that doesn't matter. But it's like, okay, if I know that I am strictly monogamous, I don't have any business being with anyone other than a strictly monogamous person, and that's my morals. Like, I'm strictly monogamous. I want to be with someone who's strictly monogamous. But, it's like, kind of like, I've talked to people who are polyamorous. It's like, or people who's like, I could never just be with one person. But then they make that vow, to honor, like, you knew that going in. Like, why did you even make that vow? Because that person feels so hurt now. But then there's also, the people who change as they get older. And it's like, what is the motivation for change? Is it because, you've outgrown your partner and your partner's just completely boring? Is this a Pandora's box thing that's opened up and now you're exploring an interest that's coming to you later on in life? Is this something that perhaps you suppressed your entire life? And now, it's just like, I have to just be me, or you met somebody else and like, I just feel free, like I can express myself. And how does how does a monogamous, or how does a relationship endure that? Do they get a divorce? And I think especially, it's interesting now, like, where certain people, it's like, I married this person, he was a man, I was a woman, he was, transgender, and now he is a woman and I'm a woman, and they're staying together because the relationship's not just based on sex. It's based on great friendship. It's based on compatibility. It's based on financial dependence. So there are so many factors. And I guess it really comes down to, do you know what's right for you? And, don't settle, don't compromise. But at the same time, if something's, so it's like, hey, this is my lifestyle and I'm going to push it on you, and you're not open to it, respect that boundary as well if you want to keep that person in your life. And no matter what, there are consequences to your behavior in every single thing you do. If you are, I just got married when I was 18 to my 18-year-old high school sweetheart. I had all of these gifts and all these potentials to do great things with my life, and I sold myself short, and I lived a very small town, small-minded mentality, and I never ever explored in life, sexuality or whatever. You're stunted there. Then there's the consequences. I've had, plenty of, friends, over the years who, do become polyamorous, that have been hurt, or even clients that have been hurt. I've seen, I was talking to a girl not too long ago, and, she was polyamorous because, she agreed to open and swinging relationships. It's just to keep the guy, and that's not what she wanted at all. And it was completely eroding her self-esteem, and I lost one of my good friends from years ago because I didn't go to her wedding because the guy she was marrying would not stop bugging me. And I'm like, and I kept telling her, this is not okay with me. And then she would tell him, then he would bring it up again. And so, her wedding was out of state. And so it would have been driving, and I would have had to see if I got off work, but because he wouldn't stop, I couldn't go. I didn't feel comfortable going. But it's like, you got to know who you are, how, and who you want in your life, and how, and be thoughtful of your boundaries and other people's boundaries as well, and energy as well.
So if I'm understanding you, basically.
That's such a therapy thing to say. Like, if we were just friends, I'd be like, don't pull that crap on me.
But to summarize it, you're saying you need to know yourself well enough in this relationship, depending upon all of those many, many variables, will likely not work out if they can't be negotiated and navigated well.
Well, I mean, like, what part? I mean, like, there's people who, like, they never have sex anymore in their relationship, and they're actually quite happy. They love to travel, or they love, traditions and family and stuff like that. So, I mean, a relationship like that, there's some people that, like, they're married for the money. It's like, you can do whatever you want because I'm getting your money. You know what I mean? And it's just, what are the dynamics of that relationship? And it's just kind of like, the dynamics of our relationship is monogamy and love, and then they want to change. I don't foresee that working out very well. And then, so let's just say on the other end, so if you're hearing what I'm saying, I'm just teasing you. But it's like, okay, like, all right, I'm with you. And like, all of a sudden I'm having a lot of desire for other people, sexually, it's like, is it just sexually? Does it transcend to like intellectually or socially? Like, have I outgrown you? And it's like, I'm so bored with you intellectually that I'm also bored with you sexually, and I feel like I need to be with other people, and then is that really a sexual issue, or is it more of a relationship issue? And maybe that relationship's not something you want to be in anymore. Or I don't know, maybe it's like, there are definitely throughout all of history relationships where people are multiple spouses, and it's happy and it's healthy and it works and it keeps the community together. There's much fewer, histories of women with multiple husbands, at the same time than there are for men with multiple wives. But yeah, I think it comes down to knowing yourself. And that's the thing too, Tamara. Like, I've known myself since I was little, and I'm so blessed and grateful that I am, because I know myself. I'm so comfortable with other people being themselves, and it doesn't, as long as it's like, okay, you're trying to change me and make me into something I'm not. Like, I have a problem with that. But if you're you and I'm me, and it doesn't matter to me at all. Like, hey, we can go out and have lunch, and this is our common interest, and we'd like to talk about this, and we, are both animal rescues or something like that. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's like, what are our common interests? How do we get along as well? More so than, focus on any differences.
I hear you loud and clear, girlfriend.
Okay.
It makes total sense. And I think I would encourage anyone who's considering polyamory to sit down and speak with a poly-positive counselor like myself, or there's other great ones out there, Gina Sinerigi. There's a few others that I can refer you to. And you can start with several books. There's two that I recommend to everyone: A Counselor's Guide to Open Relationships and Rewriting the Rules. And I will put links to those in the show notes, because there are all of those factors that you talked about. You're spot on. Those need to be discussed first.
Right.
Why and where. And I call it the scaffolding. We need to talk about some of the negotiables and non-negotiables regarding quality time. And in my situation, there's kids involved, so that would have to be negotiated, etc. But one more final question on
Okay.
polyamory is, well, no, before that, one of the women said that she now feels ashamed for even suggesting it. And I think that's unfortunate, because while poly may sound taboo, so's other things. In fact, some of the Christian women that I worked with back when I was still offering groups out of the church, some of them were afraid to give their husbands blowjobs because of some shitty bullshit they'd heard from not our pastor, but other pastors about it being a homosexual act. So, I mean, really, anything about sex needs to be able to be talked about, and you don't need to feel shame for thinking about it, certainly, and bringing it
Right.
up. Yeah.
Right.
Again,
Right.
have a conversation with a professional.
Yeah. And so, and if regardless if you believe in soulmates or not, like a sign of a healthy relationship is a relationship in which you feel like you can talk to them about anything.
Anything. Mhm.
Yes, anything.
So now that she's brought it up, you can either let it go after talking to friends and other people. Maybe it was just something that you needed to see if it was a possibility, or you take his butt to therapy and see if you can approach it with a counselor who's going to hopefully keep the defensiveness out of the room as much as possible.
Yeah.
So, final question, because we definitely have to go. Navigating your partner's jealousy and possessiveness, she says, as someone with a lot of muchness, who I feel you, I have a lot of muchness too, who likes to share herself with others and have the freedom to share and receive unlabeled affection and intimacy with many people, not one. How do you navigate the jealousy and possessiveness? I would say, as someone with experience in this, number one, start with Kathy Labriola's jealousy workbook. Super, super, super helpful. And attempt to translate your desire for this in a way that does not make them feel like they are receiving less. Meg Barker's Rewriting the Rules, super good for this. She talks about some of those common fears and antidotes to those fears. Because typically with poly partners, the key is that they're uncertain at times of where their role is for you. If this other person takes on more of your time and attention and your sexual interest, what does that mean for him or her at home?
Right.
So we navigate that. One of my favorite and it's ways of describing it, and it sounds super reductionistic, and I don't mean for it to be, but it's a great way of conceptualizing it, is like ice cream flavors. I love chocolate, but I also love peanut butter or cappuccino crunch. My desire for cappuccino crunch does not take away my desire for chocolate. I can have that all day long. And so even if you have spent 2 or 3 hours with another partner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're still going home and loving on that chocolate. It's still the best goddamn chocolate you put in your mouth. So having conversations that center around the safety and security of your intimacy with your primary partner are so key. Always start with that foundation. What are your thoughts, Jamie?
I'm not really coming up with much. I keep looking at the question. I'm like rereading it over and over, and it's just kind of like your jealousy and possessiveness. I think we kind of, I don't know. I guess I think so many things transcend to all areas of your life,
They do.
And it's just, if that partner, it's like, hey, we have this consensual polyamorous relationship, but that would be, or we have a strictly monogamous, like jealousy is annoying either way. Like we agreed to this, you know what I mean? And it's like, this is something we both wanted and we both agreed on, but then again too, again, there's no matter what there is, there's always matters of the heart, and it's just kind of like, what happens if, like you were to start to, like you got an allergy to chocolate and you really like peanut butter, then, it's like, oh, hey, I lost, my heart connection, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's always, and everything in life, there's so many consequences. And it's like, you have to just walk the path for you and know what's right for you and live the absolute best life and version of yourself. And I don't know, jealousy to me, and again, I read about in the book, it's such a waste of an emotion. It's such a waste of an emotion. I don't know. I'm not too okay with jealousy. I know it exists more so than it doesn't. But I mean, it really is just such a waste. So, I mean, no, and the thing is, someone's going to cheat on you. They're going to cheat on you at work, or they're going to cheat on you. Like you think that they're out doing something, they're out doing something totally else. So, I mean, it's just kind of like, well, why even be jealous? But it's just kind of like, if you agreed on this, hey, we both like this, it's like that's something that you're both very open to. It's like, why is there jealousy? And I guess that's probably something you need to go back and talk to your counselor about as well.
Yeah, it's a really pretty basic human emotion.
I know. It's a basic, I know. It's like, that's like, yeah.
I totally hear where you're coming from, but there's also, for a lot of these couples, it can renew their passion for each other. So when I think about like my jealousy scrolling through Instagram sometimes and seeing, my colleagues off doing amazing things that I would want to do, I found it really useful to be like, what's the thing that I'm craving here? When I can look at what the jealousy, quote unquote, is pushing me towards, is it that I want to travel? Well, then how can I travel more? So in the case of polyamory, am I comparing myself to a woman who's completely opposite of me?
Yeah.
Well, then that's unfair, and that would be a bit of a waste. But is it that I want to see that twinkle in my partner's eye towards me again? Well, then what do I want to do about that? Because that I can do. And we can work on for my more Buddhist-y, metaphysical types, working on that sense of compersion, being happy for our partner's happiness. I am happy when my daughters, for example, spend time with their biological father and he shows them a good time. It was a struggle for me at first when a stepmom would come into the picture and they'd go and have a girls' day. I would feel jealous. I would. Yeah. And then I'd have to be like, wait a minute, though. It's about my baby girls right here. Right. And of course, I want them to have a good relationship with their stepmom and have fun. I don't want their only fun to come from me. So similar mentality that I keep with polyamory. If my partner comes home happy and we have tremendous hot sex, then it's okay. Mm-hmm. But again, talk to your counselor. There's we can't answer that in just 2 seconds. There's a lot to unpack there. Jamie, you're amazing. I'm glad we did this, girl.
You're amazing. You have always so much fun energy. Like I listen to your podcast and it's like, I love to hear your laugh. And like, you have like this such gut laugh. It's like, it's like you're always laughing. I'm always so serious. So like, yes, I'm not a jealous person, but if I was to be jealous, I'd be jealous of like, oh my God, she's always laughing. Like, it's like, I'm like, oh God.
I definitely don't take life too seriously. I've had to work on that though. Before age 30, I probably did.
Yeah.
So tell us quickly about your new book and where people can go grab it.
Well, on Amazon. I mean, it's on Barnes & Noble as well. But I mean, 70% of the books bought in the U.S. come from Amazon.
Yep.
But then with Amazon, they have expanded distribution. So that's pretty much anywhere in the world, whatever site you go through, there's a link to it. So the title is Single, Pitiful, and Unlovable, ... Yeah, right. And so Sarah, from my first book, it can be read as a standalone, but, there is references definitely to the first book. It's her life. It's her journey through singlehood, all different types of relationships, what she's growing and learning and getting out of every single relationship. And ultimately, it's about finding purpose. I had one person, contact me and they're like, oh, I'm writing a review, it's a great dating book. And I'm like, did you finish the book? They're like, no, I'm only to about chapter 13. I'm like, wait a second, there's going to be a plot change. There's a plot change. It's more than, it's what we go through. It's, relationship betrayal, like friendship betrayal, the people you think that are going to support you and love you when you go through really hard times, the ones that don't stand by you, the ones that surprisingly do, that really kind of shock you. Everything that we have to go through to grow and revolve. I kind of put this into this person. So whenever I create this character, I thought about like all of the amazing single women I knew, and it's kind of like I took their best traits. But then like she's flawed and she has faults as well, and and like I intentionally made her mess up in certain things. And people sit there and say, is this autobiography? No, it's not. Are there aspects of my character that I write into the character? Absolutely, because it's what I can relate to. But like one of the chapters I wrote after watching a Dateline episode. Do you know what I mean? mean? So it's not, I don't know. I love this book. To me, it's very real. It's very raw. It deals with a lot of emotions, but it's everything she's growing. Like, I wish I would have read this book when I was like 15. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have known that. But it's like, we learn from every relationship, good and bad, and it's what she's taken away with her.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Go get the book.
All right.
Thank you, love.
I always put my books at 777 because I'm superstitious,
Ooh, I like
No,
it.
No, but I like it because, after I wrote the first book, it was like $10. Like, people were literally contacting me like, I can't afford $10. I'm like, how could I make it as cheap as possible for as many people as possible? But no, I truly, truly love this book. And I love the other one too, but, this one's for different reasons. And I think it's, and again, I'm always very surprised at the population who wrote it. Like, more men have contacted me. It's about a single woman and her journeys and her friends and their experiences and everything else along the way and her coworkers. But it's men who are contacting me. Like, in my mind, I was writing it for like women like 25 to 59, and then it's men who are like contacting me that they like the book so much. Whereas my other book I wrote for young men going through, some suicidal ideations, and the people who contacted me were, women in their 50s, 60s, 70s to be like, I love this book. I can so relate to it, which is very surprising to me. Yeah.
Well, you are such a joy. Thank you, my dear. And happy travels.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.